Hi, I'm Dr. Mike, and this is NFGeeks. Well, this is a Theme Thursday video for Thursdays. I usually make a video based on a theme to inspire everyone to make their own videos, as a reply to this one. And this week's theme is going to be about God and spirituality and religion. That's been kind of going on all week at the forum on Facebook. And a lot of stuff about God and what his types is Jesus. Josh and I did a bunch of videos, and so a whole bunch of conversations going on. And so I want to expand on that. What's different about this video is that I don't want to talk about it conceptually as much as I want to talk about it personally, because that's kind of the difference between the theme videos and the regular Ask Dr. Mike videos. Those are kind of conceptual. And I like to keep these a little less conceptual, to be honest. Kind of just talk about how it means to me as an NF and an ENFP to have all these things. So I want to talk about that and talk about my own sort of religious and spiritual journey through my life. So, and I've talked about it in bits and pieces in other videos. So this, hopefully, I'll bring it all together in one sort of thing. So I was raised Roman Catholic. Okay, that was my the religion of my youth, of my childhood. And I was raised by people who were Azorean Portuguese, a very rare ethnic group in the nation, but that group is very, very Catholic, okay, and it's a very tight-knit group of Catholicism, and everybody goes to church, and that's that. So I went to church fairly regularly with my family, more than just Christmas and Easter, pretty much not every week, but almost every week, so it's very common to go to church. And a lot of my religious and spiritual self is founded in Catholicism, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I know Catholicism gets this horrible rap because of everything that's happened with the sexual scandals and the pedophile scandals within the church, but that has more to do with the bureaucracy and who they're letting in and why and what are they doing about it than whatever the ideas of Catholicism is or the way God is worshipped, through that. I think that's a different thing, and so a lot of myself is grounded in Catholicism in terms of spiritual thought and religious thought. And I don't think in a bad way, okay? I think in a very good way. So here are the good ways that I see it, and because these things have carried over into my adulthood, very much so. So first of all, God is a serious business. People say this is a bad thing, but I don't think it's a bad thing at all. Catholicism isn't all clapping and guitars and all that. It's very serious. Shh, be quiet. It's serious. Some people can't take it, or they misinterpret what that is. But I interpret it as sort of going into a deep, sort of solemn place of taking, your relationship with God, or whatever God is. Contemplating God is a very serious thing, and something you should, not take lightly. And I agree with that. I agree with that part of it. I like the rituals of Catholicism. There's a lot of pomp and circumstance and theater, going on. But rituals are very important because I see rituals as orientations. Okay? In the same sense that, a certain, if you're sitting in a chair a certain way, or, you have a compass, it's orienting you to go in a certain direction. And I think rituals do that too. Confucius thought that. That the importance of rituals is that it points you in a direction towards God, or towards thinking about God, or any of those things. In Catholicism, it's not only pointing you towards God, it's pointing you in a direction to which you receive grace. It's back and forth orientation. But minimally, a ritual or a performance of some kind, and I don't mean that lightly, is a way of sort of, aiming your consciousness towards God and towards that kind of thought. Okay, and in that kind of spiritual sense, wherever your energy is going to go. If you're taking it seriously, behind, and looking at the meaning of it, that's where some NF things come in. I was always contemplating as a boy the symbolism of things, and what it meant, and and how it connects with life and all this. It was very important. The Mass was very important, the way it was acted out. I paid all close attention. I wasn't zoning off. I was like watching, what was going on and what does this mean, and and they're holding this thing up, and it's always very, very interesting to me as a kid. I would sit there and quietly watch. It was so all the symbolism of, and Catholicism is filled with symbolism. Okay, it's everywhere. It's in the statues, it's in the saints. It's in the crucifix, it's on the stoles of the priests. I mean, you can't escape symbolism in Catholicism. It's all over the place. It's very ornate. I always like that. And again, what I like about the ornateness of it is that the symbols sort of guide your consciousness into a place thinking about God. Okay, and thinking about what does the symbol mean, and what's the metaphor behind it, and all that, and thus then what's the metaphor that's being told about in the scripture, and and things like that. So that connection, is also very important to me in terms of foundation. And I think also that there is an intellectual side to religion that you can go into. That's one of the things I learned through most of my education. I was Jesuit educated when I was in high school, and my graduate and postgraduate career was all at a Catholic university. And I'm quite happy about that, because you really got sort of a very rich religious sort of thinking in theology and religious studies, all of that. It was really great. So a lot of my spiritual, now that doesn't mean my entire religious self is only in Catholicism. My point in making that is that it's rooted in Catholicism, and a lot of how I feel about God and religion can be traced back to these Catholic roots. It was very sort of isolating though, because again, I came from a family of SJs, and this isn't bad, but they had a different view as to what church was about, okay? They were much more into the ritualistic side of it and the importance of it in terms of what you're supposed to be doing and when, and being part of the church and having feelings about God and Christ and things like that, trying to connect your feelings. But there was no kind of other level going on, of sort of this mystical understanding that I was having. I first contemplated metaphysics in church as a boy, I've told this before, but it comes from the Nicene Creed, which they've changed. It's awful, but we believe in one God, the Father, an Almighty, Creator of heaven and earth, of all that is seen and unseen. That thing about all that is seen and unseen, I've been contemplating ever since. I've never stopped thinking about that. I remember thinking about it at 8. So they didn't necessarily. It wasn't bad, but we shared a different. We didn't share the same experience. I'm sorry. We shared the same religion, and we shared the same sort of sense experience, being in the same church with together. But I never felt that I had an understanding that was heard or that I could speak about with them, that they could grasp. You know what I mean? And not because they were stupid. There was just this disconnect that happened everywhere I went with them, and it was in church too. Because they were coming from a very SJ point of view about religion, which is right in its own its own context. There's nothing wrong with that. When I was a teenager, I became much more spiritually active on my own and working on my own and doing, as opposed to with my family. I got involved in religious retreats that existed through Catholicism, but existed through various churches and also through my high school that I went to, the Jesuits. And sometimes they were weekend long, Friday to Sunday. And these retreats were they were mostly youth retreats. And sometimes I was going as a participant. Sometimes I went on a team as a team member working it out. I used to do, younger people like 12, 13 when they would go on when they were getting their confirmation. That's a Catholic thing. Well, I guess it's not just a Catholic thing, but I'm talking about Catholic confirmation. They would go on a retreat, a day-long retreat before they got confirmed, and I would be involved with that and work on that. And, as a teenager. I did this all up until I was about 20. Like 14 to 20, I was very involved in this and did a lot of it and was glad to do a lot of it, actually. Now, when I got to 20, here's where it gets different. When I got to 20, I kind of got to a place where I felt that Catholicism had... I'd learned everything I could possibly learn from Catholicism up to that point based on my age or whatever. It's not that I rejected anything Catholic. I just, I just had gone, I felt that I had gone to its boundary, and if I was going to continue this exploration, I need to explore it beyond Catholicism. Okay? Not instead of Catholicism. I explained that to my mother until she died, that because the common SJ response is you left the church. In Catholicism, it's that you left the church. That's what they say. But I don't feel that I ever left the church to this day. I just decided to do other things in addition to the church. I actually consider myself trans-Catholic. That's a word I made up. And what I mean by that is that I'm not ex-Catholic. I never gave up on Catholicism. I just went outside of Catholicism and transcended it and went to other things. Not necessarily transcended it up to other levels, okay? Just to sort of transcend it across, And I became very interested in various other religions and religious thought and ideas, that run the range. That includes Hinduism and Buddhism and Islam and, Sikhism. I remember I read all about everything I could. And to this day, I still do that. But none of it, all of it was an exploration and kind of an interest of ideas and things, and what is the experience they're having, and and what is what does it mean to come into experience and come into God through this experience the way they're doing it. It's something I've been fascinated all through. And then through my graduate degree, I went through Catholic University and then studied it on this whole other level, not just Catholicism, but again, all these different religions. Okay, took a lot of world religious classes. That's one of the things I've been taking. And the reason for that is that I've always had an affinity for religious thought and spirituality. It always came easy for me. It never came hard, ever. It's one of the things that was like, falling off a log. This goes way back, again, I, when it came to things like confirmation and stuff, I remember the Ten Commandments and the Beatitudes and stuff like that. Other people were terrified if the bishop called on you or whatever, but I never got it, So for example, when I was a child, I'd go to CCD. This is something the Catholics do, boys, girls, kids. And I always did great. I never had a problem. I had the book. I read the book. I did great at it. I never got yelled at, by the CCD teachers. I always did fine. It was easy. Came easy for me. And when I took religious classes at my Jesuit high school, those were one of the few classes I got A's. I always got A's. That was easy, very easy. In religious thought classes through college, through graduate school, I've always been interested in it and good at it and easy to do it. And I think it's just because I deeply personally ask those questions, you know what I mean? But it's not as intellectual as it sounds. I guess I give you that as the background. This is the part I actually want to talk about. It's not as intellectual as it sounds. It's much more NF. It's much more a deep sort of subjective way of sort of coming into contact with the mystical and with God and really getting into that place, on an emotional, empathic level of an opening up of the self. See, I'm already talking NF. The opening up of the self in order to receive whatever depth of mystery is going on with God and to have this sort of empathic relationship with God, what Martin Buber would call an IU relationship. I really try to do that with God. I mean, I think about that every day, about having an IU relationship with God and beyond the universe. That's something I've never said. People who know me, I think, don't know that I do that. They know I'm into IU because I've talked about it, but that I'm actually having what Martin Buber tried to say, that you want to have this sort of dialogue with God, not God as an object, God as a vending machine, where you tap in and hopefully you get what you want out of God, but to have a true interaction and relationship with God. And I actually do try to do that daily. I do in my head sometimes. I'm just sort of trying to do it. And so it's much more of a NF kind of deep feeling, empathic place. That doesn't mean I don't like contemplating things like theology and what is the nature of the Trinity and all that. I find it fascinating. I could read that stuff all day. But that's not where my direct personal experience is. My direct personal experience is in a very sort of NF mystical place, about it, to get into that place. And it's very humbling, and I take it very, very seriously. That's why I don't actually talk about it a lot. Again, I talk about it conceptually because, I'm sort of an intellectual when I'm talking to you guys, and and I talk to my students, and so I have this intellectual thing going on, but I have a much deeper personal place where I come from for this. So, for example, all right, and again, even people who know me personally in this world, okay, don't really know this, but I pray every day. How do you like that? I bet you didn't know. You know now. But I do. I pray every day. A little prayer, sometimes more, sometimes less. But I always pray every day. And and they're Catholic prayers too. I mean, I pray, I go back to my old self, to my what feels intimate for me. And Catholicism prayers are sort of they're interesting to me now because Catholicism is dying, and it's sort of like having almost an arcane knowledge now. And what I'm referring to is the Hail Mary. I like that prayer a lot because you're sort of coming into the feminine side of God, or the feminine side of the mystery, whatever it is, which has always been a part of religion. There's always been a Mary and a Shira, consorts of Vishnu and all that, Lakshmi, and that's always been around. So it's sort of the Catholic way to do it. It's a very I like the Hail Mary as a prayer and what it says, and just knowing it from memory, and now I feel both good and bad, like it's being lost. It's lost. I don't know how many people know the Hail Mary. I don't know anybody younger than me that knows the Hail Mary. I know older people than me who know the Hail Mary. But I don't know if I know anybody under 40 that knows it. I'm not so sure. Maybe somewhere you're out there. But, that's sort of an important prayer for me. And so I say these prayers because just like the ritual, it's orienting. You know what I mean? It's not about magic. Like, again, an IU relationship isn't having this magical relationship where, because I say an incantation, bananas pop up or something, like out of Harry Potter. That's not what prayer's about. Prayer's about orienting yourself into a place to get in touch with these things. Just like meditation is a way of getting you in touch with something. Prayer is like that. Prayer is meant to get you in touch with the divine or the mystery, or whatever way you want to call it. Get you into this place where you're sort of in contact emotionally, at least as an NF, having this relationship with God, connecting up with God or across with God, whatever way you want to look at it. And that the prayer is the way of setting you and getting you in the right position in terms of your consciousness to do that. That's what prayer actually is. It doesn't mean you don't sort of pray about people or for people or like for situations. I mean, you certainly do. But the purpose of the prayer is to get you into a place with God. It's just like any kind of relationship. You can't have a relationship with somebody if you're back to back. What I mean? Somebody's got to turn. Things like that. It's meant to do that. That's what prayers do. And so it's very important to me. I've done, so for example, it's hard for me to do the Hail Mary, the Rosary. I got rosary beads. I got a ton of Catholic stuff. I should have brought it out here, but for my family. It's hard for me to do the rosary beads because even with the beads, I start, my ADD kind of kicks in. Not that I have it, but I get a little bored, and then I lose where I am, and then I'm like, oh God, it's stupid. But I've done novenas. I've done those before in my life. I've done a few over my life over the past 30 years. A novena is when you say certain prayers every day, praying for intercession with a certain saint, with God or whatever. And, it might be saying the Hail Mary and the Our Father in various ways or whatever. Novena I think usually means 9 days. You do this every day for 9 days, Sometimes it's repetition. It's almost like a rosary. Some people it's like a novena is like a rosary every day for 9 days. But still, that's a novena. And I've done those, and I've done them several times. And I find them to be very, very wonderful and spiritual and really sort of connecting in a way. And they kind of work. It doesn't work. Again, you can't think like Harry Potter stuff with this. You have to think like, doing all this, sort of orienting yourself, put your consciousness in a way that now you interact with the world in a way that was different prior to when you did it. And then that opens up things that normally you wouldn't have seen because you didn't have, that sort of orientation prior to doing it. So that's what happens with things like that, a lot of times. There's various places around me that again are Catholic that are shrines that have all the statues and of the saints and things like that. And I go there and light candles for people, relatives, dead, alive. And say prayers and say the Hail Mary and things like that. I've done it for my mother a bunch of times, One of the things that I liked, and this is a good thing to end on, although it's sad, I think. One of the things I liked about the doctor, the former, the last one, is that she was also Catholic or raised Catholic and Azorean Portuguese. And I could talk to her about this stuff, and she was an NF, so I could talk to her about this stuff and she completely understood it. I didn't have to translate what my thoughts were or feelings about this. She had them too. And sometimes some of my happiest moments with her were praying, moments of prayer, going to some of these shrines and things like that and saying a little prayer for somebody or whatever. That's one of my happiest moments. So that was kind of, it feels good because it's possible to share that with somebody. Hopefully, you'll get to share whatever your spiritual thoughts are too. All right. Actually, the last thing I want to talk about is the kind of a weird NF thing, and I'm going to out some of us about this, and that is that it's one thing to think about God, it's another thing to hear God, and I can't speak for the other types, but I know secretly, quietly, NFs, and some, not all the NFs, only some of the NFs talk about what it means to hear God. Okay, to actually hear God and to hear the voice of God, and what does it mean to hear that voice of God? And Elijah, for Elijah it was a whisper, a quiet, and Muhammad would hear a ring when he heard the Quran, things like that. There's something sort of NF going on with that. And I have to say for myself, I do have an internal dialogue going on sometimes with God, where it's still my own voice, but it's still like a dialogue that is mine but not mine. And I think that's what, because you can do that in NFs, because NFs do that anyway with people. We have sort of narratives going on in terms of conversations, and that are, because we know people come up pretty well, correct. But I think we also sometimes get into that with God, and and that's what it means to hear the voice of God, I think, for NFs anyway, is to actually get into a place where you're emotionally relating to another voice that is your own, but it's not your own, in the sense of deep prayer or even deep meditation, And that's tough, because there's going to be NFs watching this going, I don't know what he's talking about. That's crazy. What's he talking about? Shh, they're going to start, not all the NFs, but I personally know NFs who understand what I'm talking about with this. And so, don't worry, I won't mention you by name. but there's many NFs I know who have talked about, what does it mean to get into such an emotional place in relationship with God that you sort of can actually start hearing God, when you're in that empathic, NF emotional place about people, And so I think when I hear about that, when I ever hear about that in any kind of religion, I kind of think that. I think, oh, that's like an NF thing going on there. So, all right, so that's it. That's sort of my video about it. It's a very interesting topic that I like to talk about. And so make your videos, and what do you think? Also, if you're an atheist and you think everything I've said is crap, go ahead and make your video. Well, thank you for watching NFGeeks. Don't forget, you can join in the discussion on the Facebook discussion group forum. Please come and join us. NFGeeks is also on Tumblr and Twitter, and check us out there. So, want you to join in, and I would love to hear what you have to say. And don't forget, NFGeeks, that's where it's happening. It's always happening at NFGeeks, and if you go to the Facebook forum, you'll see that it is always happening.